from ACM for the delay. This was due to unexpected technical problems. We really are sorry for keeping you waiting. The Active Citizens Movement welcomes you all to a discussion this afternoon with an incredible lineup of South African women who are engaged at the forefront of various civil society organizations, who are all addressing the plight of some of the most vulnerable people in society. As 2020 Women's Month draws to an end, 6 months into our nationwide lockdown, we convene today knowing that our world is currently being consumed by two devastating pandemics, eating away at the fabric of society as we know it. Not only are we witnessing the angst and suffering caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, we are also witness to the most brutal and violent pandemic of gender-based violence. And we once more see women bear the brunt of these repercussions. In today's discussion, we'll be looking at the challenges and some marvelous work being done by women in the early childhood development sector, in informal housing, in work with regard to environment and climate change, abused women, the LGBTI community, labor and informal traders, and work among sex workers. We also have a few beautiful musical interludes by the renowned and talented Debbie Mari and her daughter Leah, who have recorded and even composed songs for this gathering. And furthermore, we have an item by the Abahlali Women's Choir. So apologies for the delay again. Grab a cup or a glass of your favorite and relax with us. I now hand over to our first speaker, who is Lisa Wimble. Lisa spent her youth in Hilton. She is a single mother to 5 boys and a survivor of GBV who returned to South Africa in 2018. She has studied and become a highly respected tree life coach to help support victims of gender-based violence, especially during this current pandemic. She has begun working in the Bulwer area to help develop and uplift the surrounding communities in economic development, education, and wellness, and has most recently aligned herself with the Wonder Bag organization and the Community Chest in the distribution of subsidized Wonder Bags into impoverished communities across the whole of KZN and soon across the whole of South Africa. We are so happy and pleased to have with us today Lisa Wimble. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you. My name is Lisa Wimble. I work for Wonder Bag, and today I'm going to be representing the ACM of Pietermaritzburg. As women of South Africa, we believe in the vision of a socially cohesive society based on the values of South African Constitution. We are citizens of action. We make things happen on every level of humanity, fairness, and responsibility. We truly believe we can make a difference in everybody's lives. Let me introduce you to the Wonder Bag that can and does play a part in so many people's lives. The Wonder Bag is a simple but revolutionary heat retention cooker, which continues to cook food, which has been brought to the boil by fire, cook stove, or any other conventional method for up to 12 hours without the use of any additional power or fuel source. But it is more than just a cooking bag. The Wonder Bag is a catalyst for change. Both the Wonder Bag and my mission is to empower and inspire women across Africa and the globe by making a positive difference in their lives in order for them to achieve their full potential and ultimately resulting in economical empowerment. We have a belief that the Wonder Bag can play a critical role and be a solution in the challenges facing many of our communities, and is a real solution to sustainable cooking across our country. The Wonder Bag is a solution for better, healthier, safer, and cost-effective cooking that helps relieve the environmental impact. The Wonder Bag was founded on the following principles: 1, dignity and human resilience, subsidizing goods rather than charity, and creating entrepreneurial opportunities for women around the world. 2, globally relevant products and services, business models that truly succeed in selling responsible, solution-orientated products and services. 3, products that address our evolving climate reality. Many products that are long-lasting, solve problems, and do not rely on power sources. That in turn means sustainable products that support local jobs. Our purpose, money saving. Less income is required for purchasing fuel sources. Health. The Wonder Bag reduces smoke inhalation by nearly 80%. Indoor air pollution is the biggest killer of humans. It kills more people than TB, HIV, and malaria combined. Some 4 million people a year, and is the biggest killer of children under the age of 5. Energy saving. It saves firewood, gas, electricity, and paraffin. Water. Water usage in cooking is saved by nearly 90%. Time saved. Cooking time is reduced, so time is offered and afforded to other activities such as education and income-generating activities. Traditional meals. Traditional meals are now affordable as previously fuel costs made them unaffordable. Safety. It reduces the risk of rural women and children being sexually assaulted when collecting firewood. 82% of rapes occur in rural areas when women and children are collecting firewood. Burns. It helps drastically reduce cooking burn accidents and shack fires. Nutrition. Slow cooking is recognized to be far more nutritious, as slow cooked food loses very little of its nutrition. Food wastage. Reduces the wastage of food due to burning. Food cooking in the Wonder Bag cannot be burnt. Versatility. The Wonder Bag also keeps food cold or frozen for up to 10 hours. In a single year, a single Wonder Bag will accomplish the following: save up to 8 trees being chopped down, save 1,000 liters of water, create $365 of disposable income, create 1 job for every 1,000 bags sold, save over 1,200 hours collecting firewood, reduce up to 1 ton of carbon emissions. These are the reasons why Time magazine voted Wonder Bag one of the top 50 genius companies of the world. Partnerships are critical to the success and the impact of the Wonder Bag due to increasing food poverty, both pre and post-COVID. Partnerships with sustainable food gardens like those headed by Coral, whose commitment and energy has created the prospects of becoming a sustainable empowerment venture for the future. I believe that as long as we continue to support our women, work together, create awareness, we will overcome the odds and help those struggling to find themselves, their abilities, their potentials, and their environmental skills. As women, we need to believe in ourselves, our potential, and understand that we have within ourselves the ability to become that which we desire. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for the wonderful work you're doing. And I'm sure there's going to be great interest in your work hereafter. Our next speaker is Nonhlanhla Mkhize, who represents Amnesty International Durban. Nonhlanhla is a human rights advocate and executive director of Enablers, an empowerment collective. She is the chair of Amnesty International Durban Group and the SANAC Human Rights Working Group. She's also a co-founder of the LGBTI Community and Health Center and the current chair of the SANAC LGBTI sector. Nonhlanhla, it's such a privilege to have you here with us this afternoon. Thank you, and over to you. You can unmute, Nonhlanhla. Please unmute.
Sorry. Good afternoon and greetings, colleagues. It's quite wonderful to be sitting around the table with all of you this Sunday afternoon. Of course, it's an unfair occasion, so to speak, in the commemoration of women's rights, but also in acknowledging why we have what is called a Women's Month in a country like South Africa, with all the beautiful laws that we have. So greetings, colleagues. And I must say, when one was initially engaged by a colleague to participate in this conversation, I had sort of asked myself, but why? And of course, as we spoke, I know the answer to the why, but I guess for a moment there, the conversation was such that it had just come after one had been exposed to a request by a team of men and women that one provides support to in doing their community education and support, where they had indicated their discomfort working within the rural environments in the South Coast, where we had just learned of the deaths of 5 women. And of course, from a police perspective, the argument is it could be serial killers or murders that are happening there. But I think where one was located is here we are within a space and time in a country with as beautiful laws as we've got and so much funding put into the plight of women's rights. And yet we find ourselves in spaces where it has become general reporting on media that women are being violated, that bodies of women are being found in our own cane fields, sugar fields, and so on. And I think for me, when that conversation happened, it had hit me quite hard because it had just been an afternoon where one had come back from visiting a client who is a trans woman from one of our townships here in Durban. And that afternoon, the survivor had learned that the perpetrator had been granted bail, and the perpetrator so happened to be their neighbor. So it begged the question, why are we still having these conversations when a lot of us are so angry, when a lot of us are so mad, when a lot of us don't even want to talk anymore because it has really overwhelmed us. With your permission, colleagues, before I continue, I just want to switch off video because I have issues with connection here and my screen keeps flashing and I don't know how it looks on your side. But with your permission, can I just close the video? Then it freezes. So the question, what is gender-based violence? How does it look? Who does it happen to? Why does it happen? What does one have to do to stay safe and free from it? To who and where does one go to get help, and how can it be stopped? When will it end? Are some of the questions that many, if not everybody participating in this conversation have asked themselves, have been asked to try and provide an answer to, or maybe involved in everyday work or activity, where in various efforts are trying to bring an end to this pandemic. And I think it's quite frustrating to realize that we talk about gender-based violence, but many have yet to internalize what it is. So when we talk about these questions, when we engage with these questions, for a number of people that we work with, is still very much working with a concept, working with a notion that happens to others but themselves, but not very close to them. And it's been frustrating, I think, to realize as well that for many, it took the COVID-19 national lockdown to bring the concept of what is gender violence closer to themselves, closer to their own homes, and gave them a deeper understanding and meaning to what it is. I think for me it's frustrating because I sort of took time to reflect on some of the work that a lot of us colleagues have been involved in. I mean, within Amnesty, we've had a 3-year-long campaign on My Body, My Right, where we perhaps might have not spoken about the concept of gender-based violence as framed, but spoke about not touching, not doing, not harming the body as it belongs to the other person, the concept of respecting the rights for all, respecting a person's right to dignity, and also the choices that they make over their bodies. But somehow, just as one thought we were getting that, you realize that in the campaign activity, when you ask young people to put together flyers, to put together imagery, and sort of share with us what is it that they are learning from this experience, it gives you a sense that we still get stuck in understanding what is this gender-based violence and therefore what to do about it. So I'm hoping with conversations like ours, and the more we engage with individuals as one understands them as survivors more than we see each other as victims, is going to perhaps bring us to a different space in time. I think some of the other things that one also worries about within the work that we do and what COVID-19 has brought to the fore is the understanding that, you know, a lot of us are working with individuals that are at senior positions within different departments that are supposed to be helping us fight this pandemic, but that, you know, you sit in a call one afternoon with these people and you realize that they themselves are carrying a burden where the systems within which they work are not respecting who they are not respecting their bodies, are not respecting the work that they are trying to do. And so when we talk gender-based violence, are we by all means also engaging with those types of violence or seeing gender-based violence as visibilized within those spaces, as visibilized within spaces where you come to attending a meeting where you're supposed to have put together a rapid response to murders that are happening in your area, and yet you have colleagues that have decided not to make time to sit around the table where you put together ideas that would fast track purposes. So I guess colleagues, what really one wanted to contribute this afternoon in this conversation as active citizens is very much we are people that are not waiting for answers to come. We are people that are very much at the forefront of fighting the pandemic. The question is, are we seeing the pandemic the same? Are we seeing the pandemic as it visibilizes itself beyond just what has happened to the bodies of women that are being violated, the men, at most gay, at most trans women that are finding themselves having to deal with how social and religious norms have been around the concept of gender and stereotyping, but also how within the spaces where we work, the systems within which or under which we work themselves are violating us and making it further difficult to get out of the boxes that we find ourselves in, the marginalization that we currently experience. So yeah, I think colleagues, if you'd allow me, that's really what one wanted to put on the table, from really a body that is, when we talk about sex and sexuality, identified as female, living their lives very much within the stereotypes of womanhood, within relationships with same sex, where as you expose yourself, share pictures of yourself on social media, put yourself in front of a campaign, the responses are still very much what a waste, are still very much being seen as a vagina more than the person and the personality that you embrace in spaces where your voice is such that you need to have certain credentials to be given significance. But that even in spaces where that significance is given, somehow the mere fact that you are within a particular body still renders you marginalized, still renders you a person that is exposed to violence. So I hope, colleagues, that sort of is fair a start. There's so much more that goes on in a person's head when a space like this is provided and a conversation like this takes shape. But I'm hoping that for many of us, we do not have to have been survivors of sexual and physical and war crimes to suddenly realize just how deep the meaning of gender-based violence is within us, our communities, and the experience of it, and how much more is still needed of us to change things around. So I'm hoping that through our conversation today, we'll be able to find ways to working together as nations, to working together with other countries to bringing about an end to the conflict, which has made gender-based violence even worse than what it is in certain countries, where hunger has continued to be a reason why some of us in our bodies and our families are experiencing gender-based violence, but also where in our conversation and in our work, we are able to find ways of putting an end to these harmful gender and social beliefs and stereotypes of who we are as human beings in our different diversity. So with those words, I want to wish us a progressive and very intimate conversation and wish us well in our deliberations, and with hope that one day we will not be talking gender-based violence at all in our society again.
Thank you so much for that. I think that was so interesting, and I'm hoping that as we move forward, ACM would also be able to work more closely with, and engage with the organizations you represent, Nonhlanhla. We look forward to taking this working relationship much further. Thank you very, very much for your input. We were supposed to next have Debbie Mari. I'm not sure if we're good to go. Selvin? We have, Debbie has composed a musical item for this meeting this afternoon. So we'll now have that little musical interlude by Debbie Mari.
Debbie, please unmute.
Debbie, please unmute yourself. Oh, the recording.
Hi, I'm Debbie Mari. And I'm Leah Mari. Thank you for the invitation to join today's important discussion. As women in the arts industry, we feel incredibly grateful for our platform, and so we hope that you enjoy our musical offerings. Then let's go shopping. Then let's not show. So the Bible says, still it's news. But God bless the child that stands on that that's got his own. Yes, the strong is born, while the weak ones fly. Empty pockets don't ever make the grave your mind. You're a man, but God bless the child that's got his own. Well, you've got money, you've got lots of friends. They'll be crowding around the door. But when it's gone, it's funny. You don't come around anymore. Which relations here? Rest of bread and such. You can help yourself, but don't take too much. You're a man, but God bless the child that is all. That's God is all. God is all. God is all. God bless the child that's God is all. That's God is all.
Thank you to Debbie Mari for that wonderful rendition. We do apologize if the sound quality wasn't so good this afternoon, but we will try and share that on our Facebook page after the event. Our next speaker is Nomusa Sizani. She is the General Secretary of Abahlali Basemjondolo Movement of South Africa. She's also a member of the Abahlali Women's League and an activist. Her struggle as Abahlali Basemjondolo is in land, housing, and dignity. Nomusa sadly lost a son during the struggle for land, and that has served to motivate her to continue with the struggles for land. She's also a motivator to other women in their struggles for land. Nomusa, it's such a pleasure to have you with us this afternoon. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me here. And good afternoon to everyone. Again, my name is Nomusa Sizani from a Shack Dwellers movement, which is Abahlali Basemjondolo, a Shack Dwellers movement that fights for, protect, promote, and advance the interest of people living in the shacks and impoverished people in South Africa. Of course, our vision is to build a just and equal society based on respect and dignity for all humankind. Since Abahlali Basemjondolo has been formed in 2005, we have been facing brutal evictions from the municipalities. And these brutal evictions, mostly people who are affected are women. Because most of these shacks, most people who are living there are women. Some women are single parents. And these evictions, they are leaving us as women traumatized, depressed. Some, they got anxiety. These brutal evictions are leaving us as women with scars, because it is not nice to see your home, the place you call home, being demolished in front of your children, in front of your eyes. It is not nice. to see your children or your husband being brutally beaten in front of your eyes. We have faced these serious evictions even during this time of pandemic. By the time our government said there will be no evictions during this time of pandemic, but it was happening. And because of the injustice that is happening in our country, in South Africa, these brutal evictions are carrying on, but there is no one who's getting arrested after these brutal evictions that are carrying on during this time of pandemic. During this time of pandemic, 24 women of one of our settlements, which is Azania, were arrested. Their crime was just to sleep outside after they were rendered homeless. So they were arrested because they slept outside. They resisted and slept outside. The day, 3 days before a Women's Day, one woman of a Kenana settlement was brutally beaten by more than 10 men from Kevin Security, Land Invasion, and eThekwini Municipality with the back of the guns and chopped with the knife, with the bush knife. After that, the case is not even being followed because of these injustices that are happening in our country. As Abahlali Basemjondolo women, we are facing a lot of challenges. Even the gender-based violence has increased during the time of pandemic because now most people are hungry and an unemployment rate has increased. Because of the hunger, they are taking their frustration out of women and children. So as Abahlali women, we are facing that gender-based violence. We are being physically abused, emotionally abused, verbally abused. The worst part, so many people are hungry. Some, they lost their jobs. After they lost their jobs, there was this money of UIF that they were supposed to have, but they didn't have that money because the corruption that is happening. UIF money was eaten by people who didn't need it. It didn't reach the needy people, those who were supposed to get that money, UIF money, because of the corruption that is happening within our ruling party, ANC. Most people, they didn't get even the food parcels. There were food parcels that were distributed during the time of COVID-19, but they were distributed politically. If you are not a card carrier of a certain party, especially the ruling party, you are not going to get the food parcels. The food parcels, they were supposed to be distributed fairly, especially to needy people. Luckily, we did have an organization like Abahlali Basemjondolo. We distributed a lot of food parcels to needy people. Luckily, some of our communities, they have the communal gardens and communal kitchens where we eat as a community there. But it is very sad that in the country that we are living, we are being denied basic services like water, electricity, and sanitation. Because water is life. Our body needs water. We are not the ones who need water, but our bodies need water. But we don't have. We have to walk miles and miles to go fetch some water. That exposes us into danger of being raped, of being killed as women and children. So that is why, as Abahlali Basemjondolo, we were very disappointed and angry while Zandile Gumede was appointed as a member of KwaZulu-Natal legislature after the fraud case that she's still facing of the fraud of 400 million rands. So that is why we were so angry as Abahlali Basemjondolo women. The only thing that we need to do, we need to be united as women. Even in post-COVID, we need to be united. We need to have the communal gardens. We need to have the communal soup kitchens. And also, we need to build a just and equal society. And the only way to build that justice society and equal is to build a democratic power of the oppressed through organization and the mobilization. There is power in organizing and there is also power in mobilizing. I thank you.
Thank you so much for your interesting input, Nomsa. And I'm sure going forward as ACM, we would love to partner with you. You are already working with us as part of the Coalition of the Poor. And let's hope that that partnership can help improve some of the challenges you all are facing. Our next speaker is Patsy Pillay, who I think many of you would know. She represents an organization called New Beginnings. Patsy is an anti-apartheid activist and an advocate for early childhood development for the past 39 years in South Africa. She has a deep passion for children and women's development, and as the founding director of New Beginnings Training Development, she has extensive experience and expertise in ECD. Patsy has received many accolades and recognition for her work in ECD, including featuring in the Mail and Guardian book of 100 Women Leaders in 2011. Her extensive work in ECD saw her being appointed as the South African National Rep on the World Forum for Early Childhood Educare, and she's also presented many papers at different conferences. Her passion for serving the vulnerable ECD constituency saw her jointly leading the first ECD training inclusive group made of deaf and hearing impaired students, which was a first in South Africa. And we're so honored to have you with us this afternoon, Patsy. Over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Yashica. I'm just wondering if Selvin would be able to put on the slides, or should I just go ahead without it?
Please go ahead. I think there's technical problems. If you can continue.
Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues, friends, and comrades. Can you hear me, Yashica? Okay, so I will have to just look at my notes. My apologies there. Oh,
your
here
slides,
it is.
your slides
okay,
are
thanks.
coming.
Thank you, Selvin. So can we move on to slide 3, please? Thank you for this opportunity to speak on a very important aspect in South Africa, early childhood development. Many of us here this afternoon would know that early childhood is recognized internationally, as well as in South Africa, a fundamental right for all children. Early childhood development in South Africa refers to working with children from 0 to 9 years. So there's different age cohorts, but here in the presentation, we're going to be addressing the 0 to 5 year cohort. Children in South Africa are protected in our Constitution as well as in the Children's Act. ECD is also acknowledged in the National Development Plan as a priority goal for 2030. There's a lot of attention being paid to early childhood education because we know that the first 5 years of the child's life is the most significant, because it sets a solid foundation for children in preparing them for formal schooling, as well as sets a solid foundation for the later development. Many research studies have also shown that those children that have access to early childhood development, they continue their schooling, they continue their tertiary education, and there's generally a lower rate of delinquency in society, amongst other facts. We also know the new research now points to the importance of the first 1,000 days of the child's life as being the most significant. This is actually from conception to 2 years. And Unfortunately, or maybe this is an area that in South Africa, we need to pay more attention to mothers in making sure they have the right nutrition, that they are well cared for during this period. We also know that early childhood education is extremely important in setting the right values. And here we can speak about, issues around respect, addressing the issues of gender stereotypes and so forth. Just to elaborate a little bit, ECD can be home-based. It can be in a formal setting. It could be informal. It could be a class held in a school. In the informal settlement, in the informal sense, it could be home-based. It could be in a garage. It could be in an outbuilding. It could be in a hut. It could be underneath a tree, as you will see from there. So because this is Women's Month, I thought it's important to say, or to talk in respect to women in South Africa in terms of childcare. ECD, or childcare, as I could almost say like a triple impact investment. Firstly, early childhood development provides a nurturing environment where children can be stimulated. They receive all the care as well as activities that embrace their early childhood development. Secondly, it enables the labor market entry for women by providing them with a safe place, because the women know that they could go out to work knowing that the children are in a safe environment. Thirdly, it ignites the new economic opportunities for women by creating, as well as creating direct employment for women, the women that are working in early childhood in the sector, not only the practitioners, but also the cooks and the gardeners and so forth. Recently, we also heard on Women's Day, the president made a speech on women and access to economic opportunity. But unfortunately, he failed to mention the pivotal role of childcare in enabling women to seek such opportunity. Next slide, please. I think many of us here would know that early childhood is actually a feminized workplace. The practitioners earn a very, very low salary, if I could say a stipend, and the conditions, if any, are extremely poor. 99% of our workforce are women, largely Black African women, who spend long hours, 6 to 6, in the creches or ECD sites, who have to multitask being practitioners, doing the administrative work and many other tasks. Generally, ECD workers are very undervalued. ECD is seen as women's work, yet we know for a fact that they, as part of the informal economy, there's a huge contribution made to the economy of South Africa. Next slide, please. So we want to also focus on the lockdown impact on early childhood development in South Africa. From March, ECD sites, and you may have seen this on television, on the media as well. The ECD sites were closed. The practitioners received no salaries. There were no fees from the parents. There was no subsidies issued by the Department of Social Development. The children missed out on the one meal they probably had for the day. There was a very negative impact on the well-being of both the children and the practitioners. We had many stories of neglect and abuse of children. And most importantly, although ECD sites could open in July, government made no PPE and cleaning materials available to the ECD sites as promised. And remember that these ECD sites, especially the practitioners or the management committees, have had no access to finance. Next slide, please. So what happened here? we're happy to report that women took action. Enough is enough, because at this point in time, with most of the ECD sites closed, there are 175 jobs on the line. 30,000 ECD sites are likely to close. 1 million children stand to lose access to early childhood development. And ridiculous as it sounds, when the workforce goes back to work, the question is, who will take care of our young children? Where will our young children be? So the background to this is that on the 30th of July, the Minister of Social Development, Minister Zulu, shared the news that 1.3 billion was allocated to train 36,000 youth monitors for the ECD sites. The field was flabbergasted, because it was our opinion that this money could, not to say that the youth should not be taken care of, but this money should be used to save the ECD sector before it collapses. So there were many national structures, including the SA Congress, NECTA, Bridge, that took up this issue. And the COVID-19 Coalition ECD work stream also led a campaign where they wrote letters to the minister indicating the background and suggesting that this money be well used to save the ECD sector. The minister was flooded with emails from various sectors in the community. There was an online petition with more than 11,000 signatures on the petition. We had a week of action, perhaps you may have seen that on television and on the media, from the 17th of August, where there were many pickets, both online as well as physically. There was a lot of media coverage, and civil society via the Intersectoral Forum took up the issue with the Department of Social Development and asked that a presentation be made with Treasury that this money, 1.3 billion, be deferred to the early childhood sector. And we are waiting for news. Unfortunately, there's no news at this point. Next slide, please. So what is it that we want, other than the fact that the 1.3 billion will serve a short term, what happens in the future? We want at political and policy level, yes, to redirect the 1.3 billion to the ECD sector, to save the sector, because our children's lives are at stake. Our practitioners' lives are at stake. The parents' lives are at stake, because they are going back to work. Where would they leave the children? We want government to provide the support materials such as the PPE, as well as the cleaning materials that will enable our ECD sites to open up, because they certainly can't afford to buy those materials. So they remain closed, yet they want to open their sites. We want government to take note. You may know or may not know that the majority of our sites in South Africa are really unregistered sites. They deserve to be registered. They deserve to receive the subsidies. We are also calling on the review of the process of registration, as well as standardization of the regulations governing the registration of sites, because if you're in Western Cape, it's different. If you're in KwaZulu-Natal, it's different. We want opportunities for professional development of our ECD practitioners. If you need a degree to teach in grade R, why should our ECD practitioners not have access to the same education as the grade R teachers? And we want government to subsidize this through ECD bursaries, through learnerships. We're asking the fact that in many countries, early childhood development, such as Cuba and other countries, are free. If tertiary education has been made free, why not early childhood education? Because this is where the foundation is set, not at matric level. We need to do far more in early childhood education. We want a basic income grant, not generally, but also targeted at our practitioners, because they have received, those that are registered, which is limited, receive a meager amount of approximately 16 Rand per child. So if children don't come to class for a week or two, that gets deducted. So they're left with a paltry amount, which they have to share in paying salaries or stipends, admin and nutrition. We believe that the practitioners are really doing the work of government, and at the end of the day, they should get a basic grant for them as practitioners. The paltry stipend that they get in terms of subsidies should be increased. And we believe that there should be one department that oversees early childhood development that we can hold accountable. We also see with COVID, we've seen so much of distress in the field that we believe that the government and civil society, funders and other stakeholders, that there should be a national consultation regarding the plight of early childhood education and how do we take this forward. With that, friends and colleagues, I'd like to leave it there and thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Yashica, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, sorry about that. Yes, apologies. Thank you, Patsy. That was so informative. And I think you've spoken about such a crucial area of work where there are such huge challenges, so many problems, and the distressing situation we find ourselves now during COVID. We really do need to come together and work. And I really do hope that going forward, there will be far more support and also from other NGOs and civil society organizations to work together with you. We really thank you for being with us and for informing people about this very dire situation that we find in the ECD sector. Thank you very much, Patsy. Our next speaker is Shiksha Benimadho. Shiksha comes from a psychology and anthropological background. She has been working in community development for the last 15 years and has served on a number of NPO boards nationally. Shiksha specializes in people transformation, youth engagement, and rural development. She leads a sustainable livelihood and youth project for a global management consulting company. She currently sits on the board for the Advised Desk for the Abused and is here today representing them to talk about the effects of COVID-19 on GBV. Thank you, Shiksha, and over to you now.
Thank you so much, Yashica. Is there any chance I could get my slides on the screen?
Yes, I think Nora is going to try. Nora's saving the day. Sorry, we've unfortunately lost our techno person. Nora, is there going to be some slides that you'll be able to assist with?
Shiksha would have to have emailed me the slides, and I don't think she did. I'm sorry about that.
If you can just make me a post, and then I will just show it on my side.
You can email it to me. I'll quickly put my email address there.
Can we move on to another speaker so long? Yes. Okay. I'll just move on. Can we move on to a musical item by Leah Mari? Is that possible to go ahead with?
Yes, we'll do that. Thank you.
Nora, are you okay?
I'm not the girl I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me.
Thank you to Leah Mari for that beautiful rendition which she recorded for us for today. Are we ready to go with Shiksha now, Nora? Or shall we move to Sherelee, I think? Sherelee, is it good to go?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I think while we sort that little... Sherelee, thank you so much for being with us. Sherelee Odayar is a project officer for the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance. Her focus is on opposing oil and gas activities, advocating for renewables and ocean protection. Being born and raised in South Durban and being affected by the pollution, she took a keen interest in environmental conservation and justice. She currently sits on the Committee for Oil Watch Africa and works with many groups internationally and locally on climate change. Thank you so much, Sherelee, for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you, Yashica, and I'm very honored to be a part of this panel and this platform, as it's very important that we take notice of a woman's struggle and how women are disproportionately affected by the climate change crisis. So we all know that the climate crisis is a global phenomenon, and it has been impacting the world for a long time. And it's not new news that people who are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change are from low-income households, predominantly people of color, like the Global South, even though they are least responsible for actually contributing to climate change. Their carbon emissions are far less compared to that of the global north. However, climate change deepens existing inequalities. The effects of climate change are entrenched in gender inequality. When we have extreme weather conditions like droughts or storms, women are more likely to live in poverty than men, have less access to basic human rights, like the ability to freely move and acquire land, and women face violence that escalates during periods of instability, like we see during the COVID crisis. Now, even though we live in a modern society, unfortunately, due to social constructs in most households, women are the load bearers of the home. If there's no electricity because of the energy crisis, no water, no food, no secure shelter because of droughts or storms, it is women that will bear the burden and that will sacrifice the most for her family. Climate change is making it harder to manage household responsibilities like cooking, cleaning, gathering resources, and caring for children, especially in remote rural communities. In rural communities across the globe, women and girls are the ones that's gathering food, water, and household energy resources. As droughts worsen, forests burn, they have to travel further distances and spend more time acquiring these resources. And as a result of this, they have less time to pursue outside sources of income, which prevents them from becoming more economically independent. In some cases, girls have to drop out of school to take care of their family. In many communities, women are usually the main food producers of crops and vegetable gardens. But because of no rain, they're not able to get an income and feed their entire communities. However, it's not all doom and gloom, because women are a force to be reckoned with. Women are showing remarkable resilience around the world. They lead in climate action movements. They champion in clean sources of energy. Some of the greatest environmental movements were led by women, like the late Wangari Maathai, Vandana Shiva, who continues to advocate for climate change, even in her age. And now we see Greta Thunberg, who's leading the climate strikes worldwide. You know, government will acknowledge that women are most vulnerable and most affected because of climate change, but when it comes to actions like policies, they somehow become gender blind. So women need to and do play a critical role in the response to climate change, because women possess local and invaluable knowledge of adaptation. You give a woman one vegetable and she can make an entire meal. You give her one packet of seeds and she can develop an entire business. Women need to participate in the decision-making processes at both national, provincial, local, and community levels. And then they can help devise effective climate change solutions that build stronger communities. It is very important that us as active citizens, as the voice of civil society, to make sure that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherelee. That was such one of the common threads I'm seeing in everybody's input is how women are bearing the brunt, not only now during COVID, but in all the different sectors, and climate change is no different. Your excellent work in SDCEA is noted, and we as ACM certainly will continue in that partnership we share with your organization via the Coalition for the Poor. Thank you very much for being with us today. I'll move on now to our next speaker, who is Shiksha Benimadho. Shiksha comes from a psychology and anthropological background. She's been working in community development for the last 15 years and serves on a number of NPO boards nationally. She specializes in people transformation, youth engagement, and rural development. She leads a sustainable livelihood and youth project for a global management consulting company. She sits on the board for the Advice Desk for the Abused, and today, representing the Advice Desk, she will talk about the effects of COVID-19 on GBV. Thank you so much, Shiksha, for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here. Nora, I'll hand over to you to just put up the slides for me quickly. You're a winner champion today. Thank you so much. If you just go to slide 2, that'd be perfect. So, you know, today I'd really like to start off with a poem. And this poem, you know, if you can just go up slightly. That's good. And no, down, sorry. Okay. Ah, there we go. Thanks. So the poem goes, I got flowers today. Today was a very special day. It was the day of my funeral. Last night, he finally killed me. He beat me to death. And if only I gathered enough courage and strength to leave him, I wouldn't have got flowers today. Now, I know many of you would have heard this poem before. And it's really such a tragic poem. And, you know, it really does trigger such emotions. Yet it still hasn't resonated with abusers. And we have to ask the question, why? You know, what's really going on? Next slide, please. And some of the root causes that we have to look at as reasons for rape, femicide, murder, violence, you know, where does it really come from? And, you know, to understand exactly, you know, where are we going as a community, understanding, you know, where are the lack of morals and values in society. And, you know, to talk about the legacy of apartheid, you know, the master laborer relationships and the ripple effect of that on the households itself, you know, talking about abuse seen as the perceived normal, you know, youth and you know, people not having enough, you know, life skills and coping skills in the society, drugs and substance abuse, the lack of support. Those are all of the things that have really become the breakdown of our society and has really got us to the point of, you know, where we are today as being a crippled society. And if you could go to the next slide. And, you know, really in terms of the pandemic, and the president was really right when he said, you know, we are dealing with two types. We are dealing with an epidemic and we are dealing with a pandemic. The pandemic is Corona. And the epidemic is really the war against women and children. You know, gender-based violence seems to be thriving in the climate of silence. You know, people, our women, our children are really suffering out there. And, you know, at the time when the pandemic has really left us vulnerable, uncertain, you know, violence has unleashed against our women and children with such brutality. And, you know, rapists and our murderers really walk amongst us every single day. And it has been reported that even in the first week of the lockdown, we can actually see that, you know, over 120,000, you know, cases and calls have been sent to SAPS itself. And we ask ourselves, you know, how did we get to this point? And the pandemic has really left us, you know, being part of that crippled society and has increased gender-based violence. And that is through the confinement, you know, being at home, the disruption from your normal routine as a family, your children are out of school, you know, there's not enough help at home to be able to assist with the children's, increase the frustration. You know, parents have to now work from home, which they're not really used to. The lockdown on laws, you know, in terms of alcohol and cigarette bans really led to unresolved addictions, and the economic strains, as our rest of our colleagues spoke about on the call as well, to talk about, you know, how has that put so much of pressure in the household itself, you know, family members being unchecked and unmedicated, several other health issues, you know, and limited resources, medical resources out there. You know, and this pandemic in itself has really created that increase for gender-based violence and, you know, brutality that's happening within society. And, you know, the challenges that gender-based violence support structures face is, you know, they are unable to go out to the offices and the places where they can really assist, you know, our survivors. They have limited personnel, obviously with not being able to have the help at home. There's a need for more personnel to be actually in the forefront and being able to assist these survivors. You know, there's disrupted public services and police and justice, you know, out there. Just go down a bit. And, you know, compromised healthcare and support systems, you know, access to mental facilities, mental health facilities, you know, the psychosocial support, you know, and just the ecosystem has really been able to not be able to support the survivors that are really needed out there. And as a result, it's really kept them in isolation and has not been able to allow them to go out and support survivors as they used to. And how do we close the gap on this? How do we close the gap is the fact that, there is the pandemic happening and the epidemic of increased gender-based violence against the fact that gender-based violence support organizations can't really support now because they also are, governed by the regulations and the lockdown, and the regulations that, they have to abide by. And I think one of the things that, we really have to understand is how do we help our women out there? And this is where we feel, if you could go over to the next slide, where civil society, public, private institutions really have to come together as a collective and create that impact, and by getting out to the communities and helping the women, and, let them help other women as well, psychology students out there, women that have been through this trauma before and have been able to break the cycle. Mother Teresa has a really fantastic quote that says, "I alone cannot change the world, but I can cause a ripple effect that can create change." And I think that's so important for us to create the ripple effect, because if these organizations, gender-based violence organizations, cannot go out to the communities because they're limited by the lockdown regulations, how do we assist within the communities itself and mobilizing religious community members, mobilizing the youth out there, mobilizing youth leaders within the communities to be able to offer the support and what we can do as organizations. And that's where the Advice Desk for the Abused, which has been operating since 1986 and has offered, support to about over 450,000 survivors out there, really has been able to, do different types of training that will be able to assist, counselors and crisis interventionists that it has the ability to go out and assist these survivors within the communities as well. And I think that's what we need to do. And how do we help? How do we help women? How do we help our community leaders? How do we help, youth that are really interested in, assisting survivors as they really are in isolation? And the first thing we need to understand is always bring the survivor to safety. Make sure that they are in a place of safety. Understand that there is an importance for us to engage and listen to the survivors, assess the situation and offer them a holistic approach, understand where they are in the cycle, understand that, you got to listen without judgment. You have to identify their feelings of abuse. You have to guide them, towards the laws and regulations, and more importantly, where to go, and, and identify the inner strength and be able to self-help, allow them to self-help and refer them to organizations. And, if you know any person in the communities and organizations that can be able to assist, that have high emotional intelligence, that are sympathetic, that are helpful, caring, motivated, they're energized, they have an ability to remain calm, show positivity, show an ability for a greater tomorrow. Those are the people that have the ability to go out there and be able to assist our survivors. And I think that's vitally important, to be able to not just rely on the gender-based organizations as it stands now, but who in the communities can we actually mobilize? And I think that's extremely important. But in terms of referrals, if we can go to the next slide. In terms of referrals, I think what's important for us to know is that there are many organizations out there, like the Advice Desk for the Abused, that does help with, events, counseling, advocacy, assisting with the crisis interventionists, helplines, etc. There are many other organizations such as this Ziyaran Benevolent Home. There is the Community Command Center for National Government. There is Narcotics Anonymous. there's several emergency lines as well. Over to the next slide as well. Thank you. Thank you. We have online support groups as well that can provide these types of support to survivors. Obviously, the advice desk for the abuse is there, and that's our core function as well. There's also free counseling opportunities as well, where women and children can go to, dependent where they are in the cycle of abuse, and they really do want to leave the situation that they are in right now. And I think, the important thing for us to remember is, when it comes to survivors, we have to be able to listen without judgment, but, they can be very nervous, they rather shy, some of them are angry, some of them are traumatized, some of them remain very calm, and we have to be able to, go out there and assist wherever we can, and that's where the empowerment of women comes about, the ripple effect once again, and one supporting the other, and that's how we will be able to, survive this pandemic as it stands right now. And I think one last quote just to end, last one, thank you. And we don't forget, we really do remember, we are in mourning for all the women who really did not get a chance to achieve all that they dreamed of. We remember the Zara Hector, the Zanele Kumalos, the Karabo Mokwenas, the Hope Zindes, Annie. We remember them all. And I think it's important for us to make sure that, as advice desk, continually provides counseling, come over to us, let us know what type of support you need, from the organization itself. We are there to assist, and we have been working with this for many, many years and have several amount of experience in this, and we'll be able to guide you and assist you wherever possible in order to assist survivors out there in the communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shiksha. Indeed, we are in the second pandemic, which is a horrifying reality. And we appeal and take up your appeal and ask people who are here with us today, if you do have the qualities and if you can assist, to please go out there and assist others. This is such a terrible crisis that we're experiencing, not only here in South Africa, but everywhere. And we do, as it is Women's Month, we also mourn the many women who are not here, who have lost their lives to GBV. Thank you so much, Shiksha, for that lovely, inspiring, and informative message. And we hope that you continue and get lots more support with the advice desk. You all are doing excellent work, and I really do hope that the communities that you are working within can come forward and assist you all a lot more. Thank you very much for being with us. Unfortunately, our next musical item that we had planned, we can't go ahead with because of the glitches, but we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Pat Horn. Pat Horn is a feminist trade unionist. She was with FOSATU and is with COSATU Union since 1976 and started organizing workers in the informal economy in the 1990s after spending 2 weeks with the organizers of the Self-Employed Women's Association in Ahmedabad in India. She was the founder of the Self-Employed Women's Union in South Africa in 1994 and StreetNet International in 2002. She's currently working for WIEGO, which is the Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing, and a member of the National Task Team for implementation of ILO Recommendation 204 on transitions from formal to informal economy. Pat is also a central committee member of the South African Communist Party. Pat, we're so grateful that you're able to join us, and over to you.
Thanks, Yashica. So I don't have any slides because I didn't get well enough organized. And I'm also going to try not to take too long because we've taken a lot of time and we've had such great inputs. So I'm going to talk about the informal economy and particularly women workers in the informal economy. What we mean by the informal economy is workers who are not sufficiently covered or not covered at all by law and policies. And that means they're not covered by social protection either. So they have no cushion to fall back on when they lose their work. The informal economy in South Africa is largely dominated by women. It does depend a bit on the sector. Informal economy is not just one sector. In the old days, people used to talk about the informal sector, but now we recognize that it's got different sectors. So informal traders or street traders, about at least 60% in that sector are women. In sectors like domestic work and home-based work, it would be over 90% who are women. With the sector of waste pickers that has become quite well organized lately, it's approximately 50-50, the gender division of labor is approximately 50-50. There are some male-dominated sectors in the informal economy, as we know, the taxi sector and the fisher people's sector, although there are some women in those sectors too. And as you can imagine, they work in a very male-dominated world. And it's a very tough one because there is no regulation that protects them in any way. And then in the informal agricultural sector, that's also dominated by women. So when it came to, when the COVID virus hit us and we went into lockdown, most of the workers in the informal economy lost their livelihood just like that. And because they had no social protection, there was nothing that they could apply for. For workers who were covered by UIF, which is in the formal economy, there were provisions made for special temporary relief. That temporary relief hasn't actually been coming the way it's supposed to. But for workers in the informal economy, it was even worse. They didn't even have that aspect, that possibility. So those of us who work in this sector were actively involved with the workers in the informal economy about what was happening with them. And we tried to see what spaces there were for us to talk to government to help people to get back to work. Of course, the first thing that we started to promote, and we started even before the lockdown, when we realized the lockdown was coming, to push for basic income security, some sort of income grant that people who were not able to work at all were, could get. I think we put in a proposal for that as early as the 20th of March, which was before the lockdown started, a week before. Then the lockdown started and everybody had to stop working and they literally had nothing to fall back on. So we made an appeal to the Department of Trade and Industry to basically allow informal food vendors to go back to work, because we noticed that the supermarkets were crowded, they were vectors of infection. And the point that we made is that people who are able to sell food have been stopped. And if they could continue to sell food in the townships and in any area, a suburban area, then people wouldn't have to crowd into the supermarkets. For the first time in a long time, we were heard on this issue. And by the 2nd of April, a COGTA regulation was put out saying that informal food vendors could go back to work. Of course, there were many other people who couldn't go back to work yet, but it meant there was quite a large number of people who could get back to work. The condition was that they had to get permits from the municipalities. So you can imagine the shenanigans that we had, because Some of the municipalities claimed that their offices were closed. Others had excuses like they'd run out of stationery. Luckily, we were able to get the Minister of COGTA to be pretty harsh and to send a strong directive to the municipalities to instruct them that they had to give out these permits. And also she provided a template so that all of those municipalities who had bad permit systems or non-functioning permit systems wouldn't be stopped by that, and they were instructed to use the template. The template also helped for everybody to get permits, including foreign nationals living in South Africa. So the kind of discrimination we've seen coming from other departments like the Department of Small Business Development, even the Department of Environment and Fisheries against foreign nationals was absent in this kind of permission. So that was quite a good opening to get some people back to work. On the question of the basic income security, there was a lot of disagreement behind the scenes between government departments about this issue. In the past, there's been a very active campaign for a basic income grant that didn't get anywhere. But finally, after about 4 weeks towards the end of April, a special COVID grant for those people who weren't able to work and were not covered by any other grants was announced. It was much smaller than we hoped for. We thought we were going to get something like 700 and it was going to be too little. And then we ended up getting half of that. And then the first payout only came in the middle of June. So people literally had to wait until then to get their payouts. All the people who were not able to work during the course of April and May tried to then sign up for food relief, but we've seen what happened with the food relief. Most of it didn't get to the people it was supposed to get to. I'm not even going to go into that because we know that story. So for most workers in the informal economy, they literally preferred, if at all possible, to get back to work. They couldn't sit around waiting for this 350 Rand, which most of them actually didn't get in the end. They couldn't wait for food relief because that was not coming to them either. So most of them just preferred to get back to work. And so our advocacy has been basically to get people back to work. It's unlike the formal sector workers who got pay and then were able to, refuse to go back to work until there were proper PPEs. In the informal economy, people couldn't refuse. They had to go back to work. Plus, they had to provide their own PPEs because there was nobody else doing that for them. But that's pretty much what's normally the story with people in the informal economy. So when the phased lifting of restrictions was announced, we took a look at that and we noticed that waste pickers were only supposed to go back to work under level 2. And they were in a very desperate situation because in level 5, there had been a court case which said that their work wasn't essential. And they were just literally starving. And some informal traders were back at work, but quite a lot of others were not back at work. So we made some interventions. And the opportunity to make interventions to government did arise. The NEDLAC space, which has not been noted for its effectiveness, there's a new ED there, executive director, who's a woman. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but it started to really spring into action. And what was set up was weekly meetings of something called a rapid response task team. And we were able to use that space to get government officials to the table, to get ministers to the table, to get DGs to the table, and to basically raise issues where there were blockages and to start making some progress. So we were able to be heard again by COGTA and the Cooperative and Local Governance Ministry. And so they allowed waste pickers to go back to work under level 4. Quite a lot more informal traders were allowed to go back to work. There was a fight that continued about fisher people. It was a totally unnecessary fight because there was nothing in the basic nature of the work of fisher people. Their work is always socially spaced because if they stood next to each other, all their fishing lines would get caught up. But they were still being stopped by the municipality of Durban from fishing. So there was a misunderstanding going on there with the minister, and we managed to get that misunderstanding sorted out. So quite a lot of the informal workers basically went back to work. A lot of those who'd applied for the special COVID grant didn't get it anyway. And even before they found out whether they were going to get it or not, they were able to get back to work. And that was very important because they were also not able to sit around and wait for relief packages that were not getting to them. So now what's being talked about in this space is the question of economic recovery. And what is a lot of people say, you know, in a crisis, there's always opportunity. Well, the opportunity in the case of informal workers is that informal workers can get back to work faster than businesses that have collapsed. And getting the government to recognize that and to remove all the red tape that criminalizes their work once they do go back to work is what we've then focused on. So what's happening at the moment is that everybody's working on economic recovery plans. For the first time, the informal economy is being recognized in the economic recovery plans. It seems that it took COVID for everybody in government to start recognizing most sectors of the informal economy. But one of the things one of the floodgates that's been opened is the talk about a universal basic income grant. The Minister of Social Protection's been very busy. She was a bit resistant in the beginning, but now she's very committed to it, and she seems to be very willing to really push this issue and to push against those people in her own party who are very reluctant on this issue. So that's a good sign, but it's a big fight that we're looking at the moment. Because basically for people from the ages of 18 to 59, in October, when the basic COVID grant that half the people don't get anyway finishes, there's nothing for the people in that age group who aren't working. And so there's a very serious discussion now, and there's serious discussions going on internally, looking at now how to finance that basic income grant. And it involves tackling the Treasury, pushing back on the supplementary budget that was announced, having some differences of opinion on how the budget should be managed, which is happening at the moment. Secondly, there's a task team now on public space management, because as people go back to work, the key issue now is to get everybody back to work, but to try to reduce the vector of infection in public space, in the transport system, etc. And that means the places where informal workers are working, street traders, taxi drivers, waste pickers, etc. So we've put out some guidelines for to be used for people in those sectors, and put a lot of pressure on COGTA and SALGA, the South African Local Government Association, to work in close cooperation with membership-based organizations of workers in the informal economy. Informal traders organizations, which are largely led by women these days, waste pickers organizations, the organizations of the taxi drivers, so that they are the ones that administer the give out the PPEs for which funds are being raised by municipalities. Of course, getting those PPEs into the hands of those people is still a challenge because of the amount of cooperation there is in the sector. And then we've got COGTA and SALGA to agree on a principle of what we call do no harm. In the same way that in principle, although it's not working, as we heard from Abahlali, Basemjondolo, where there's an actual regulation says that eviction's not allowed, we're asking for a regulation that says confiscation of street traders' goods is not allowed either. In principle, COGTA have agreed to do it, but they haven't done it yet. They seem to be scared of their minister, and we found that the minister seems to be obliging when it comes to these issues, so it means they just haven't talked to her yet. And then they've also agreed that they need to develop a new permit system, which is much fairer, much more less discriminatory, and minus all the red tape that exists at the moment. And then there's also been a renewed push in the NEDLAC space on the ratification of ILO Convention 190, which is on the elimination of harassment and violence in the world of work. And it doesn't only mean formal workplaces, it also applies to informal workplaces, which includes then again public space. And it includes community workplaces, and it includes commuting to and from work, and travel for work, and workplace-owned living spaces like hostels and so on. So this was a convention that was adopted last year in June 2019. The government of South Africa was supposed to have ratified already. There's some inexplicable delay in that. But fortunately, because of the attention that's been brought and the space that's come available through NEDLAC, there was a very lively webinar yesterday afternoon where the Department of Employment and Labour and the Department of Justice had to come to the table to explain why this convention hasn't been ratified yet and what's causing the delays. And we had a really, really large group there putting an enormous amount of pressure on government. And it looks like we've got some sort of a promise to ratify this by the end of the year. But that will focus on the high levels of gender-based violence which take place in the workplace, in all of these different workplaces that I'm talking about, even the secret workplaces like the private homes where domestic workers work, and so on. So I'll end there. I hope that I've filled one gap, because there have been so many amazing presentations on so many other areas. So I haven't even gone in there because I think they've been very well covered. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk about this afternoon.
Pat, thank you so much. You actually gave us hope in this whole presentation. So many successful interventions during COVID in vital sectors. You're quite a legend in your own right, and we're so pleased that we've had you on our panel here today. We do, as ACM, wish you the best as you get back with economic recovery plans. The issue of the basic income grant is something that we as ACM strongly support, and you can rest assured that we'll be very happy to work and support you as you go forward pursuing that. But thank you for that. I think you've given us a brilliant insight into so many developments that you've pursued during this time. Thank you very much for being with us. And so, comrades and friends, we move on to our final speaker before we have Nora. And we were so worried about getting Nozizwe on board because we heard that she was somewhere in the mountains and may not connect, but she's been with us here throughout this afternoon. Our speaker is Nozizwe Madlala-Routledge. She is from an organization and the founder of Embrace Dignity, a women's human rights NGO campaigning for the enactment of the abolitionist equality law, a legal framework for dealing with the system of prostitution. It's also known as the Nordic model. This innovative law was pioneered in Sweden in 1999. A little bit about Nozizwe. She's recently taught a 2020 spring semester course on South Africa's peaceful transition at Haverford College. The course reflected on the achievements and shortcomings of the negotiated settlement 30 years into that transition. She was one of a few women at the negotiations for South Africa's transition as part of CODESA. And she has been a member of parliament. She was a member of parliament in South Africa from 1994 to 2009. In 2008, she was elected Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Prior to that, she served as Deputy Minister of Defense and as Deputy Minister of Health. Nozizwe was a delegate to CODESA, and in 1994, she was elected into the Constituent Assembly which drafted and adopted South Africa's new constitution. She's a recipient of the Tannenbaum Peacemakers Award and has an honorary doctorate from Haverford College, Pennsylvania. Thank you so much, Nozizwe, for being with us this afternoon. Over to you.
Can Nozizwe unmute herself? We cannot
Please, can you
hear.
unmute, Nozi? Hi, Nozizwe. Can you please unmute? Thank you.
Okay,
Go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I've been reminding people to unmute themselves, only to forget when it's my turn. COVID-19 has changed even the way we hold our meetings. I've enjoyed the music from Debbie, Murray. However, I've missed the singing together that we usually do at our meetings. And what I want to do as I start is to say, Malibongwe, Malibongwe.
Igama lamakhosikazi.
Igama lamakhosikazi.
Malibongwe.
We thank the women. We thank the women of Active Citizens Movement Gender Subcommittee for organizing this event today as we approach the end of Women's Month. We thank you for inviting us into the space to imagine a future without COVID-19, or a future where we can manage COVID-19 as a normal chronic illness. We are grateful that we can gather in this space to imagine. You know, when I was thinking about imagining, I thought about the struggle and how so many of us present in this space have been part of imagining a future where we chanted slogans, freedom in our lifetime. And indeed, we did see freedom come alive. But in the 30 years since Mandela walked out of prison, I've become aware that freedom is a constant struggle. And that's the reason we gather like this, to remember the past, to thank those who have gone before us, and to plan the future. Just as I was preparing to join you this afternoon, I was thinking of a period 100 years ago when women gathered, organized under the Bantu Women's League, and protested those many years ago against the extension of past laws to African women. And today, when we stand and celebrate the march of the women to the Union buildings in 1956, we remember that history on which the Women's March built. We remember the women of KwaZulu-Natal, then called Natal, who protested land dispossession. We remember women who joined trade unions, like we've just had one speak right now, who reminded the men that we cannot free the nation when half of the nation is not free. They organized for women to be accepted as part of the National Liberation Movement, as well as part of the labor movement. So today's theme, calling on women to speak, is very much along those lines of reminding everybody else that our freedom is not yet won when half of South Africa is still living in bondage. So we're grateful for having this opportunity. Can we move to the next slide? Nora, can we move to the next slide?
Those are your slides, I think. She did it.
Okay, so I've been asked to speak to you from Embrace Dignity. Now, Embrace Dignity is a women's human rights organization that was established 10 years ago. We work with prostituted women, and this has informed our understanding of the system of prostitution, which we actually see as a system of oppression. And it is it's interlocked with other forms of oppression, including patriarchy and economic oppression. Under COVID-19, women are among the most marginalized and vulnerable, particularly prostituted women. We've been advocating as Embrace Dignity for the abolitionist equality law on adult prostitution. And we're glad that people that are advocating with us are survivors of the system of prostitution. This particular law was pioneered in Sweden 20 years ago in 1999 as part of a comprehensive set of interventions to address gender-based violence, to promote gender equality and combat patriarchy. So already, even as you look at how Sweden approached this issue, they saw it as part of a system which in itself was inherently violent. This has been followed, this particular law has been followed by Norway, Iceland, Canada, Northern Ireland, France, Ireland, and Israel. And we hope South Africa will become the first country in Africa to pass the abolitionist equality law. The equality law shifts the burden of responsibility from those who are bought and sold by decriminalizing them, while those who purchase sex, run brothels, and pimp others by focusing on the demand and criminalizing the purchase of sex and those who profit. So we're saying shift the focus to demand, because up to now, the laws in South Africa have focused only on the women, and we have seen that the laws have failed. Now, under COVID-19, we've seen that the deep economic and social disparities have come to the fore. So that is one of the positive things that have happened with COVID-19. It has highlighted these deep economic and social disparities. And a study that was shared with us, issued by the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, which was put together by UNDP South Africa, shows this disparity. And in fact, if I quote from them, they say the consequences born of the COVID-19 outbreak are likely to further exacerbate poverty and inequality in South Africa. This is something that we would have anticipated, but it's been confirmed in this report. And it's something that we are seeing for ourselves as women are pushed further and further into the margins. And in particular, one of the findings of this particular study is that under COVID-19, the most hard-hit sectors is the female-headed households, which are already experiencing the negative impact of COVID-19, as you've heard from the presentations in relation, for example, to those who are in the informal sector. The study also shows that Black Africans and households with many dependents have a higher likelihood of being poor. So this is confirming what we already know, that when there's an economic downturn, it is those in the margins that get further marginalized. It is those who are already poor who get even deeper into poverty. So Embrace Dignity has been working with women in the sex trade, and we know from not only observing in our own situation, but also in reading and sharing with our partners, that women in the sex trade have been the most hard hit by the pandemic. And recent online stories describe that men who purchase sexual acts now fear developing COVID-19 through their use of prostitution. So as we see, as a result of this, the commercial sex market is in a downward economic spiral. And this has reported impact proves, in fact, that the sex trade is very much driven by demand. And whatever intervention we do has to focus on the demand. I'm just trying to follow my slides, and I seem to have just lost. Okay. So I was just dealing with the downturn in the sex trade and the impact that actually has shown that focusing on demand is what's going to help us address sex trafficking, which is very closely related. So I've already said something about Embrace Dignity, that we're a feminist abolitionist organization, and that we see prostitution as men's violence against women and a form of structural inequality and oppression. We advocate for the abolition of prostitution through law, reform, and change of public attitude. We campaign for the equality law. that was pioneered in Sweden and has been followed by a number of countries. Our rationale for this is that the commodification of women's bodies is not a viable solution to unemployment. And we want to repeat this because it is often said that a number of these women are driven by unemployment and poverty into the system that actually then harms them and renders them victims. We are therefore saying that in looking for a solution, we've got to look for a holistic solution that addresses the economic inequalities, the social oppression, so that women are better able to make more informed choices. In this situation under COVID-19, what we have seen is that prostituted women's lives remain extremely precarious. We know that in some instances they're pushed into the streets, even though we know that the streets are unsafe. They are certainly at great risk of being infected with COVID-19, as well as other forms of sexually transmitted illnesses. But let's not forget that what the women face with the sex trade itself is exploitation and abuse, which they suffer every day at the hands of sex buyers, traffickers, and pimps. And what really saddens us is that many, many women who've been killed in the sex trade have not received justice. We know of many cases of such women, and we want to press that all of society should be concerned about this, that all of us should join hands and demand that the law that we want in South Africa should provide better protection for women. We want sex buyers to be criminalized because we say without the men who purchase sex, there won't be a demand. And we say that it is sex buyers who actually fuel sex trafficking. And this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I would like you to look at the figures, and you will see for yourself that in fact it's not the women who benefit from this industry, but the sex trade itself. I want to look at a slide that actually shows the profitability of the sex trade, where you can see that $99 billion a year is made by the industry from the exploitation of women, compared to 28.7% or 43.2 billion, which is profit made from forced labor, and 5.3% or $8 billion, which is made from domestic servitude. So this is an industry that is clearly benefiting pimps, traffickers, and brothel owners at the expense of women's bodies. So the law that we are campaigning for in South Africa, which is called the Abolitionist Equality Law, is the only promising legal framework that will support and give agency to those who choose to exit and remove the agency of those who purchase sex and exploit women. And we think this is a very important point because some of the people that have opposed our position have talked about us removing agency, but what we want to emphasize is that, in fact, the law that we are pushing for will give women choices and will give them agency, whereas presently the agency is in the hands of the sex buyers and pimps and brothel owners, because those are the people who determine where and when this exploitation happens. And of course, as we know, many of them who are stuck in brothels are forced to work even when they no longer want to work, which is obviously sex bondage. This happens through the brothel owner taking control of the woman's possessions, including her identity documents, and forcing her out into the street because she's not making enough money. So just to go back to how the law will make change, the law is very important because it sets the norm. So once the law is in place, it actually communicates to society that women's bodies are not for sale. And in this regard, we need the public to understand this and for them to shift the blame from the women to those who exploit them. We want the vicious cycle of the system of prostitution and patriarchy to be broken. And this law is the only law that is able to do that, to break the vicious cycle of these systems that interlink. And how does it do this? It does this by decriminalizing those who sell sex and giving them opportunities to exit the system of prostitution, while ensuring that those who are causing the harm, who are exploiting the women, are actually criminalized. We continue to keep them criminalized. And that is the only way, the most effective way for us to be able to break this link between prostitution and patriarchy, as well as the link between prostitution and sex trafficking, by addressing the demand. And in that way, we are going to be able to reduce the supply. As I move towards the end, and I continue on this conversation of us thanking the women who have struggled, who have brought us the freedom that we now enjoy, we call upon you to make sure that everybody, every woman and child can enjoy the freedom and not be forced into a system that harms them, that reduces them into objects for the gratification of men. I want to close by celebrating a statement made by Dora Tamana, which in fact I believe relates to the topic of this conversation, Women Speak. Dora Tamana, a leader of the women's movement, a leader of the National Liberation Movement, said, "You who have no work, speak. You who have no work, speak. You who have no homes, speak. You who have no schools, speak. You who have to run like chickens from the vulture, speak. We must free ourselves. Men and women must share housework. Men and women must work together in the home and in the world. I open the door for you. You must go forward." Those are her words. She opened the door for us. We must go forward. Let me close by thanking and celebrating the life of Amina Ibrahim, who we lost last week. Amina Ibrahim was a comrade who worked hard for the liberation of women, for the freedom that we now enjoy. She was part of the formation of the Natal Organization of Women, and we want to celebrate her by recording the history and the contribution that these women have made. 2 weeks ago, Hashila Narsi, Heather Hughes, Julie Wells, and myself gathered in memory of the foundations of the Natal Organization of Women, and we committed ourselves to contributing to the documentation of the history of the role of women in our liberation. We thank those others who have been keeping this going, Pingla Udit and her book. We look forward, Pingla, to your book, because this is going to start to change the narrative. Right now, when you see those people who liberated our country, those people who lead our country, it is still mostly women. I mean, it is still mostly men, even though our constitution says there should be equal participation of women and men in leadership. I want to close by saying, I agree with all of you who've spoken before me that women have the solutions. In fact, we know that women have for many, many years been able to hold together their families. At times with very little money, women are able to stretch the budget. We really want to thank you and to ask that in honor of the women who marched to the union buildings, in honor of the women who were killed like Victoria Mkhize, in honor of all those women who sacrificed and laid the path for us to be free, let us continue the struggle. Freedom is a constant struggle. Malibongwe igama lamakhosikazi.
Thank you so much, Nozi. What an enlightening input that was. You are a stalwart, Nozizwe, and you continue working with the most vulnerable in society. I think your work with Embrace Dignity is extremely important as you're working with a very vulnerable group in our community. And the stats that you provided us with, I think, are shocking and must be, most people, I think, viewing now would find it very, very informative. Really, thank you very much. And we join you in paying our condolences to the family of Amina Ibrahim And this week we lost another person who's worked very closely with many of us in ACM and our partner organizations. That is the ex-Surgeon General, Dr. Vijay Ramlakan, and condolences to Sandy Africa and their children at the same time as well. And to all many others who we've lost during these last few months of the pandemic. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I think as ACM would love to work with you and keep abreast of all the developments in your work going forward. Thank you very much. Just before we conclude, we are going to have a little summary of what we as ACM hope to achieve hereafter. And to do that, we have Nora Saneka. She's an ACM executive member, and she'll talk briefly about our objectives as ACM in hosting this meeting and the plans that we have in working together with all the various organizations we've partnered with today. But also, I just want to say, Nora has saved the day today. We had some huge technical problems, and I think our tech guy, Selvin, he really tried his best, and he sends his apologies, but Nora has come through brilliantly. So well done, Nora. We salute you, and in future, we don't need anybody else to help us from what I see. Over to you, Nora.
Yes, thank you everybody for this wonderful meeting and for the privilege of being here with you guys. And I go back about 30 years with Nozizwe because I was also in the Natal organization, Women with Her. So it's great to be together again as comrades, as friends, and as women, so that we can work together, strive together for this new society post-COVID. We always need to have a vision. And I think from today's meeting, we've got regained that sense of vision, that courage and determination to move forward. And in ACM, we see the need for this kind of multisectoral intervention where we're not in our silos, that we are able to work on commonalities together, collaborate together in civil society efforts. And what I call not working, that is not working, N-O-T, not working, but tying the knots of solidarity between our different efforts so that we can work together towards that new society in sustainable and effective ways. And through our own efforts, we can ensure that every life is respected and valued and push the government towards action through our civil society partnerships. So we need to find ways of working together in our interventions on the ground, in our own areas of work and expertise, but build up that supportive environment between each other, which an organization like Active Citizens Movement hopes to establish and is establishing, and to build that sense of pride in what we as women can do to empower other women and put a value on our lives, our work, our homes, and our children's lives. And we in Active Citizens Movement put a sense of value also on community. And in that, I'd like to just repeat the word of a civil society leader in the States who recently died, John Lewis. He said, "You are the light. You build up the beloved community when you work towards social justice issues." And particularly social justice issues we've seen in this meeting today, where women who are discriminated against and where their lives and the livelihoods of their children and communities are not valued, are reaffirmed. We reaffirm the value of each of our lives and each of our communities. And especially we work to overcome barriers of social change through our civic activism, and the kinds of exploitation that has been going on under our noses of COVID corruption. We make a stand against that every Friday now. We wear orange masks to say those who are involved in corrupt activities, who are stealing out of the mouths of women and children, should belong in jail. And so we raise consciousness, we mobilize, we organize, and we engage in action. Action that shows that there's a high price that we're not prepared to pay for inaction. There's a power that people use over us of fear, but we use empowerment, women's empowerment, to combat fear. And although those risks are high, together we are strong. Thank you, everybody, for this very valuable afternoon, and we continue the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nora. And as Nora has said, just to remind everybody that we as ACM have an Orange Mask Fridays, and we're calling on you all to don an orange mask on Friday and call out against corruption with an anti-corruption message, and to please support this campaign. We really do need to end COVID-19 corruption. And finally, I just want to say a few words of thanks before we close up. And firstly, I want to thank all our participants for their excellent contribution and participation in this meeting. We'd like to thank our musicians, that's Debbie and Leah Murray, for the beautiful renditions. We do apologize if the sound quality wasn't good. We'd also like to thank Selvin Naidu. Although we had a hitch, I think he still got us going. He's from the 1860 Heritage Center. He's really a very hardworking and helpful comrade to ACM, and we thank him for all his efforts in helping us today. Finally, before that, Nora and the ACM Gender Subcommittee, thank you for all your assistance in putting this together. To Adir Mangrud, Tahil and Yastar Padia for the design of our posters and the program. And thank you to everybody who spent their Sunday afternoon with us on this live stream. We all hope that you can engage with us in ACM and that we can work together as active citizens. I'm sure you've all found today's input highly informative, and you've seen the need in every sector that was spoken about today of how much work is required and how much there is for us to do. And I think if we all do come together as active citizens and start contributing in any small way that we can make a difference, I think we all have a long way that to go, and we can achieve a lot going forward. So thank you once more to all our panelists. You've made this a very informative and successful meeting this afternoon, and we wish every one of you well with all your projects and all the work you do within your organizations. We salute every one of you. Thank you very much. So I think if you can all just unmute yourselves, and if you want to say something before we end.
I have one more video song from Debbie Murray.
That's lovely. So we'll go out with Debbie Murray on one more item. And thank you, everybody. Be safe, stay safe, and all the best to you in your work.
I just want to thank you, Yashica, for your calm, peaceful holding together of this meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Nozizwe.
I look to the moon. I feel your embrace. This I know, love of my life, you are. Hold me in your arms once more from the front. This I know, love of my life, you are. You are. Roots to stand tall, wings to fly, love to lead the way as we look to the sky. The love I have for you reflects in your eyes, you know it's true, as we feel love supreme. Roots will stand me tall, wings to fly, love to lead the way as we look to the sky. The love I have for you reflects in my eyes, you know it's true, as we feel love supreme. Love supreme. As we feel love supreme, as we feel love supreme, love supreme.
Thank you so much for that, Nora, for putting on Debbie's lovely piece. Sorry about the sound quality, but thank you, Debbie and Leah, again for providing entertainment. Thank you to all our panelists. Good evening, good night. Please stay safe and please keep in touch with us as ACM. Thank you.
Go well.